The 42nd Interplanetary Peace Conference was turning out to be as productive as the 41 that had preceded it, which was to say, not productive at all. Ambassador Eleanor Wright of Earth stifled a yawn as she watched the mechanoid representative drone on about border security protocols in the Andromeda Arm. The massive conference hall of Athena 7 Neutral Station hummed with the soft whirring of translation devices and the occasional rustle of appendages as various delegates shifted in their seats. The year was 2584, and humanity had secured a tentative position in the Grand Alliance, a loose confederation of species that maintained an uneasy peace across 3 spiral arms of the Milky Way. Eleanor's role was strictly observational. Earth was too young, too unpredictable to be granted voting privileges. Humans were permitted to learn, and occasionally nod politely when addressed directly. Eleanor's gaze drifted around the circular chamber. The architecture was deliberately imposing soaring crystalline pillars, supported a dome that displayed a real-time holographic map of contested territories. The delegates, over 40 species in all, were arranged by coalition rather than biology, creating bizarre juxtapositions. The silicon-based Arthrax sat beside the gaseous Varelians, both members of the Quantum Alliance. The aquatic Mer Collective shared a delegation pod with the desert-dwelling Saurians, united in their grievances against the mechanoid Concordat. Ambassador Wright, are you finding these proceedings illuminating? Eleanor startled, turning to face Ambassador Zektal of the Procan Ascendancy. The Procan were humanoid, but disconcertingly so. Their iridescent skin shifted between blues and greens as they spoke, and their 3 eyes blinked in unsynchronized patterns. Quite illuminating, Ambassador, Eleanor replied with practiced diplomacy. Earth values these opportunities to understand galactic governance. Zektal's skin darkened slightly at the temples, a Procan expression of skepticism. You humans have such fascinating facial micro-expressions. Your mouth says illuminating, but your eyes say tedious beyond measure. Eleanor permitted herself a small smile. I'm still perfecting my diplomatic facade. Don't bother, Zektal replied, lowering his voice. Half the species here can detect hormonal shifts, electrical impulses, or quantum brain states. Your inner thoughts are an open book to many. That's disconcerting. Indeed. It's why most find humans so refreshing. You lie poorly, but passionately. Zektal's epidermis rippled with amusement. Eleanor was saved from responding by a commotion at the central podium. The mechanoid representative had finally completed its 17-point security proposal, and the chamber was transitioning to the next agenda item: resource-sharing agreements in the Orion Spur, a topic that directly impacted Earth's budding colonies. The session stretched interminably. Eleanor dutifully recorded notes on her quantum tablet, but her attention wandered. These conferences followed predictable patterns: grandiose opening statements, minor concessions buried in technical jargon, carefully choreographed disagreements, and ultimately resolutions that changed nothing substantial. Peace was maintained not through mutual understanding, but through mutual exhaustion. As the day's final session concluded, delegates spilled into the station's central promenade, a vast artificial ecosystem designed to accommodate the biological needs of dozens of species. Eleanor found herself drawn to the Earth Consulate's modest lounge, where fellow humans gathered to decompress after the diplomatic marathon. Any breakthroughs today, Ambassador? Asked Commander Santos, head of Earth's security detail. Eleanor sighed, collapsing into a chair engineered for human spines, a luxury on this station. The same dance as always. The mechanoids want standardized encryption protocols that would give them backdoor access to everyone's communications. The Quantum Alliance rejected it outright. Smart move, Santos replied, sliding a cup of actual coffee, another luxury, across the table. Never trust a species that can process information at the quantum level. They say the same about us, Eleanor remarked. Apparently our unpredictable wetware cognition makes us inherently untrustworthy. The lounge door hissed open, admitting Dr. Eliana Chenerths, xenobiological expert. "You won't believe what just happened in the diplomatic exchange," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. The Vortellians finally admitted their religious ritual is actually a method of genetic information gathering, Santos guessed. "Better," Dr. Chen replied, taking a seat. Ambassador Zeke of the Zecrians got into the crystal liquor and proposed bringing in more humans to break the deadlock on the Orion Spur issue. Eleanor blinked in surprise. "More humans? We barely warranted our single observer seat." "That's the thing," Dr. Chen leaned forward conspiratorially. "They're doing a random selection from Earth's diplomatic corps registry. Someone's going to get pulled into this circus with zero preparation." Santos snorted. "Poor bastard." Eleanor's quantum tablet chimed with an incoming message. She glanced down, and her coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Oh no." "What?" Dr. Chen and Santos asked in unison. "It's me," Eleanor said, her voice hollow. "I'm the randomly selected human observer." Santos frowned. "But you're already here." "Apparently that makes me the ideal candidate. I already understand the basic protocols and won't require extensive orientation." Eleanor's fingers made air quotes as she read from the message. "When do you start?" Dr. Chen asked. Eleanor set down her coffee with a sense of impending doom. "Tomorrow morning, first session." The station's artificial night cycle did little to help Eleanor sleep. Her quarters, designed to approximate Earth conditions, felt suddenly alien as she contemplated her new role. Observer was safe. Observers watched, noted, reported back. But this new position carried expectations she couldn't begin to fathom. Morning arrived with brutal efficiency. Eleanor, dressed in her formal diplomatic attire, a charcoal suit with the Earth insignia, a simple blue sphere emblazoned on the lapel. The ensemble was deliberately understated compared to the elaborate regalia of other species, reinforcing humanity's humble position in the galactic hierarchy. The conference chamber had been reconfigured overnight. A new seat had been added to the central discussion area, previously restricted to major powers bearing the Earth insignia. As Eleanor entered, conversation dimmed as delegates turned to assess the human interloper. Observer right." Ambassador Zeke of the Zecrians called out, his voice booming in the chamber. The Zecrians resembled upright lizards with feathered crests that flared when excited, as Zeke's was now. His scales showed the distinctive purple flush of crystal liquor intoxication. "Or should I say, Ambassador Right now, come take your seat at the table of consequence." Half the chamber seemed amused, the other half appalled. Eleanor maintained a neutral expression as she navigated toward her new seat, nodding respectfully to the various dignitaries. The chair, she noted with resignation, had been designed for a body plan significantly different from human anatomy. The mechanoid representative, a hovering assemblage of metallic components surrounding a glowing central core, rotated toward her. "This procedural irregularity has been registered under protest," it stated, its synthesized voice devoid of emotion. "The human presence in deliberative capacity contravenes Section 47, Paragraph 9 of the Grand Alliance Treaty." "Your protest has been noted and ignored," replied Ambassador Talax of the Silicon Confederation, a crystalline entity that communicated through light pulses, translated into sound. "The random selection process was approved by majority vote during yesterday's final session." While Ambassador Zik was intoxicated, the mechanoid countered. "Crystal liquor heightens Zecrian cognitive functions," Zik retorted, crest fully extended. "My wits were sharper than usual, thank you very much." The chamber erupted into multiple simultaneous arguments. Eleanor remained silent, attempting to project calm confidence, while internally cataloging the various factions forming before her eyes. The Quantum Alliance appeared cautiously supportive of her inclusion, while the Mechanoid Concordat was openly hostile. The Mer Collective and Saurian Federation seemed bemused, and the Procan Ascendancy was inscrutably neutral. The station's AI moderator, a neutral entity trusted by all parties, eventually restored order. "The session will proceed according to the approved agenda. Item 1, territorial demarcation in the Orion Spur, with specific attention to systems 15173 through 15190. A three-dimensional holographic map materialized above the central table, highlighting 17 star systems near Earth's outer colonies. Eleanor recognized the region immediately. These systems contained resource-rich planets that would be crucial for humanity's expansion in the coming decades. Ambassador Gorvin of the Saurian Federation rose his massive reptilian form, towering over the assembly. The Saurian claim to these systems predates human spaceflight by 12,000 years, he rumbled. We maintained monitoring outposts in 6 of these systems until the mechanoid incursion of 2487. Monitoring outposts that were abandoned countered the mechanoid representative. Our archaeological analysis indicates no Saurian presence for over 3,000 years prior to our scientific expeditions. Abandonment under duress does not constitute relinquishment of claim. Ambassador Talax interjected, light pulsing rapidly across its crystalline surface. The Gorvin plague that affected the Saurians was weaponized, not natural. Eleanor absorbed the rapid exchange, noting how each delegate referenced historical events with pointed emphasis. This wasn't mere territorial negotiation. It was an elaborate exercise in assigning historical blame. The human representative has been silent, observed Ambassador Zaktal of the Prokin, his skin shifting to an inquisitive yellow. Ambassador Wright, does Earth have a position on these contested systems? All eyes and sensory apparatuses turned toward Eleanor. She hesitated, aware that her response would establish the tone for humanity's new role in these proceedings. Earth recognizes the historical claims of all parties, she began cautiously. As the newest spacefaring civilization at this table, we do not presume to judge disputes that predate our emergence. However, she paused, considering her next words carefully. I would be interested to know the current security arrangements for these systems given their contested status. The question, seemingly innocuous, triggered a subtle ripple of discomfort across the chamber. The mechanoid representative rotated its sensory arrays rapidly, and Ambassador Gorvin's scales flushed a deeper green. Security arrangements are classified under Alliance Protocol, the mechanoid stated flatly. Eleanor nodded respectfully. Of course. I merely wondered how border enforcement functions in a region with overlapping claims. For observational purposes only. The rest of the day proceeded without incident. Eleanor maintained her role as passive observer, asking occasional clarifying questions, but offering no opinions or proposals. Yet she noticed a subtle shift in the chamber's dynamics delegates, watching her more closely, analyzing her questions for hidden meaning. When the session concluded, Eleanor retreated to the Earth consulate where her team awaited eagerly. Well, Commander Santos demanded, as soon as the door closed behind her. It was educational, Eleanor replied, sinking into a chair. I asked about security protocols in the contested systems and nearly caused a diplomatic incident. Why? Dr. Chen asked, passing Eleanor a much-needed glass of water. Because none of them have proper security there, Eleanor explained. They're all claiming territory they can't effectively defend. The mechanoids have automated sentries that the Saurians routinely disable. The Saurians have outposts that are undermanned. The Quantum Alliance has surveillance networks with spectacular blind spots. Santos leaned forward, suddenly interested. How do you know this? Body language, Eleanor said. Or the equivalent. The mechanoid's central core flickered when I asked their version of nervous sweating. Ambassador Gorvin's scales darkened a Saurian stress response. Even Ambassador Talax's crystalline matrix vibrated at a higher frequency. So they're all bluffing, Santos concluded with a low whistle. Precisely, and they're terrified that someone might call that bluff. Eleanor took a long drink of water, then added, which is why I'm going to request a security briefing from each major delegation tomorrow. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. Is that wise? Probably not, Eleanor admitted. But they invited a human to observe peace talks. We might as well give them what they asked for. The second day began with a sense of anticipation that hadn't been present before. Delegates arrived early, engaged in hushed conversations that fell silent as Eleanor entered. Her new seat had been adjusted overnight, now properly configured for human anatomy, a small concession that spoke volumes. The human has requested private security briefings from each coalition. Ambassador Zeke announced to the assembly, his crest flattened in what Eleanor recognized as concern. As the delegate who proposed human inclusion, I feel obligated to ask, what is the purpose of these consultations? Eleanor rose, straightening her jacket. Thank you, Ambassador Zeke. My requests stem from a simple observation. Peace is maintained not through agreements alone, but through the capacity to enforce those agreements. I merely wish to understand how security is maintained in contested regions. This is unprecedented, the mechanoid representative objected. Security protocols are internal matters. Not in shared territories, Eleanor countered smoothly. If multiple parties claim enforcement rights in the same region, coordination is essential to prevent accidental confrontation. Earth has experience with joint enforcement mechanisms from our early space development. Perhaps our perspective might be useful. The argument that followed was intense, but brief. To Eleanor's surprise, the Quantum Alliance supported her request, followed by the Procan Ascendancy. With two major powers backing the proposal, others reluctantly agreed. The rest of the day was devoted to these briefings. One by one, the major coalitions presented their security arrangements for the contested systems. Eleanor listened attentively, asked pointed questions, and took meticulous notes. Each delegation, eager to demonstrate their legitimate claim to the territories, revealed more than they intended. By day's end, Eleanor had compiled a comprehensive understanding of the security gaps in the region. The mechanoids relied heavily on automated systems vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. The Saurian outposts suffered from critical understaffing during their hibernation cycles. The Quantum Alliance's surveillance networks could be blind to certain energy signatures. Each system had weaknesses that other parties could, and occasionally did, exploit. When she returned to the Earth consulate that evening, Commander Santos was waiting with undisguised eagerness. Well, he prompted, what did you learn? Eleanor connected her quantum tablet to the consulate's secure display system. A detailed three-dimensional map of the contested systems appeared annotated with security information. They're all vulnerable, she explained, manipulating the display to highlight specific points. The mechanoids have sensor gaps here, and here. The Saurians can't maintain continuous presence in these systems due to biological constraints. The Quantum Alliance has impressive surveillance but limited enforcement capability. Santos whistled low. This is Intelligence Gold, Ambassador. It's not classified, Eleanor clarified. They volunteered this information in official briefings. Because none of them thought anyone would piece it all together, Santos replied. Each delegation only sees its own strengths and others' weaknesses. You're the first to compile the complete picture. Eleanor stared at the map, a sense of responsibility settling over her. What would you do with this information, Commander, from a strategic perspective? Santos studied the display, his military training evident in his analytical gaze. Honestly, I'd establish monitoring posts in these three systems immediately. They're the most valuable and least defended. Then, I'd use that foothold to gradually expand influence. Essentially what everyone fears everyone else is doing, Eleanor mused. It's what I would do, Santos confirmed. It's what any strategist would do when presented with such obvious vulnerabilities. Eleanor was still contemplating this conversation when she entered the conference chamber the following morning. The atmosphere had shifted again. Tension now permeated the air delegates, regarding each other with newfound suspicion after the previous day's revelations. The session began with standard diplomatic platitudes, but beneath the polite facades, Eleanor sensed growing unease. The mechanoid representative seemed to hover slightly higher than usual, its sensory arrays in continuous motion. Ambassador Gorvanzade whispered urgently in his ear, pointing to updates on their delegation's display. Even the normally composed Procan Ambassador Zektal showed signs of agitation, his skin cycling through stress patterns of purple and red. The holographic territorial map remained the session's centerpiece: star systems, glowing with the colors of their claimants, often with multiple overlapping hues, indicating disputed ownership. Eleanor studied it closely, noting how the most contested systems aligned precisely with the security weaknesses she had identified. Midway through the morning, as the Varelian representative was detailing their historical presence in System 15180, Eleanor made her decision. She rose from her seat, the unexpected movement causing an immediate hush to fall over the assembly. "Esteemed delegates," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have listened carefully to the claims and counterclaims regarding these territories. Each delegation has presented compelling historical, legal, and strategic justifications for their position." She moved toward the central holographic display, gesturing for permission to interact with it. After a moment's hesitation, the station's AI granted access. "However, I believe we have been approaching this issue from a flawed perspective." Eleanor continued, manipulating the display to clear all territorial claims, leaving only the star systems themselves visible. "Peace is not a zero-sum game where one party's gain must be another's loss. True peace is achieved when no party has incentive to disrupt it." With deliberate movements, Eleanor began redrawing the map, assigning systems, not according to historical claims, but based on the security information she had gathered. Systems where the mechanoids already had established automated infrastructure glowed with their signature blue. Regions where Saurian outposts existed turned green. Areas under effective Quantum Alliance surveillance shifted to yellow. "What I propose is a territorial arrangement based not on who deserves these systems, but on who can most effectively secure them, with one critical modification." Eleanor highlighted 3 strategic systems in the center of the region. These systems would be jointly administered with mandatory security cooperation between all major powers. Each coalition would establish complementary systems that address others' weaknesses. The chamber had fallen completely silent. Eleanor could feel the weight of hundreds of alien gazes upon her as she continued. "This creates what humans call strategic deterrence. No single power can act without others knowing immediately. More importantly, it creates mutual vulnerability, a shared interest in maintaining the status quo. Peace through transparency, rather than posturing." Ambassador Gorvan was the first to break the silence. "You propose we deliberately expose our weaknesses to potential adversaries." "I propose you acknowledge weaknesses that are already known," Eleanor corrected gently, "and establish cooperative measures to address them collectively." "Ah, an interesting perspective." The mechanoid representative acknowledged its typically monotone voice, carrying a hint of surprise. "The humans suggest security through mutual transparency rather than mutual ignorance." Ambassador Zaktal's skin had shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. "It is an approach that would not have occurred to any of us. Deliberately revealing vulnerabilities as a path to security seems counterintuitive. Yet logical," Ambassador Talax added, light pulsing in complex patterns across its crystalline surface. "If all parties acknowledge their limitations publicly, the incentive for exploitation diminishes significantly." The discussion that followed was unlike anything Eleanor had witnessed in her years of diplomatic service. The territorial map was redrawn multiple times, as delegations proposed variations on her model. But the core concept remained transparency, mutual monitoring, and deliberate interdependence. By the session's end, a preliminary framework had been established, one that distributed territories based on enforcement capability, rather than historical claim, with critical systems placed under joint administration. The agreement wasn't final, but it represented more concrete progress than the previous 41 peace conferences combined. As delegates filed out, many approached Eleanor with expressions of grudging respect or puzzled curiosity. Ambassador Zyke's crest was fully extended in what humans had learned to interpret as immense satisfaction. "I knew bringing in a human would shake things up," he declared, clapping Eleanor on the shoulder with enough force to make her wince. "Though I didn't expect quite this level of disruption." "I merely offered a perspective," Eleanor demurred. The willingness to consider it was entirely yours. Ambassador Zechtal approached next, his triocular gaze studying her intently. You humans have a peculiar way of thinking, he observed. You approach peace as warriors, identifying vulnerabilities, anticipating attacks, planning defenses. It's unsettling and effective. We've had considerable practice with conflict on our homeworld, Eleanor acknowledged. Perhaps that gives us a different perspective on avoiding it. The following days saw a dramatic shift in the conference's dynamics. Eleanor's role expanded far beyond passive observation. Delegations sought her input on various disputes, particularly those involving security arrangements and enforcement mechanisms. Her schedule filled with private consultations, each coalition eager to benefit from what they now termed the human strategic perspective. The mechanoids, initially the most resistant to human involvement, proved surprisingly receptive to Eleanor's suggestions for restructuring their automated defense systems. The Quantum Alliance incorporated her feedback on surveillance blind spots. Even the Saurian Federation adjusted rotation schedules for outpost personnel based on her observations. On the 10th day, Eleanor was summoned to a meeting with the conference's governing council, the representatives of the 7 founding species of the Grand Alliance. The council chamber was smaller than the main hall, but no less imposing, with ancient artifacts from each founding civilization displayed in transparent force fields. Ambassador Zorla of the Hydraxian Collective. The council's current chair addressed Eleanor directly. Ambassador Wright, your contributions to these proceedings have been unexpected. Eleanor inclined her head respectfully. I hope they have been helpful, Ambassador. Helpful is not the word I would choose, Zorla replied, his tentacular mouthparts moving in precise patterns. Transformative, perhaps. Disruptive, certainly. My apologies if... No apologies are necessary, Zorla interrupted. The Council has been monitoring your consultations with various delegations. You have identified 16 critical security vulnerabilities that could have led to armed conflict if exploited. You have proposed 14 joint enforcement mechanisms that were deemed acceptable by historically adversarial parties. Eleanor remained silent, sensing there was more to come. This council has therefore voted unanimously to create a new position within the Grand Alliance diplomatic framework, Zorla continued. The role of peace strategist, a position specifically designed for human advisors. Eleanor blinked in surprise. I'm honored, but... Your appointment calendar for the next 6 standard months has already been filled. Zorla added a touch of amusement in his voice. Every major coalition has requested your consultation on territorial disputes throughout the galaxy. The Arcturian Enclave has specifically requested your input on their millennium-long boundary dispute with the SETI Cooperative. That's flattering, Eleanor managed. But I'm just one person, and I'm technically still Earth's official observer. Which is why we have also approved the immediate expansion of Earth's diplomatic presence, Zorla explained. Your government may appoint up to 7 additional representatives to serve in this new capacity. Eleanor's mind raced. 7 more humans plucked from Earth's diplomatic corps and thrust into the complex machinery of interstellar politics. 7 more perspectives shaped by humanity's unique history of conflict and reconciliation. There will, of course, be those who oppose this development, Ambassador Zorla cautioned. Many species remain wary of human unpredictability. Others fear your kind's notorious capacity for identifying weaknesses. Yet, the results speak for themselves. We have seen more constructive dialogue in 10 days than in the previous decade. I understand, Eleanor said, processing the implications of this sudden elevation in humanity's galactic standing. May I ask a question, Ambassador? Certainly. Why are you telling me this privately, rather than announcing it to the General Assembly? Zorla's mouth parts shifted in what Eleanor had learned to recognize as a smile. Because, Ambassador Wright, we wish to give you the opportunity to decline. Once announced, publicly refusing would create diplomatic complications. Eleanor considered this carefully. The offer represented an extraordinary opportunity for humanity to increase its influence within the Grand Alliance. Yet it also placed humans in a precarious position, valued not for their cultural contributions or technological achievements, but for their capacity to identify vulnerabilities and anticipate conflict. "Before I accept," Eleanor said slowly, "I need to be clear about something. Humans aren't natural warriors or inherent strategists. We've simply lived through enough conflicts to recognize their patterns. If the Alliance values this perspective, you should understand its source." Zorla's sensory tendrils extended slightly, an expression of deep interest. "And what is that source, Ambassador?" "Pain," Eleanor replied simply. "Historical pain, cultural pain, the collective memory of conflicts that nearly destroyed us. We see vulnerabilities because we've experienced them. We anticipate attacks because we've survived them. We value peace because we know exactly what its absence costs." The chamber fell silent as the council members processed her words. Finally, Ambassador Zorla spoke again. "Perhaps that is precisely why the galaxy needs human advisors, Ambassador Wright. Many species here have forgotten the true cost of conflict. They play at diplomacy as though it were merely a complex game. Your kind brings perspective." The formal announcement came the following day, during the conference's plenary session. The creation of the peace strategist position and humanity's new role within it was met with reactions ranging from enthusiastic approval to thinly veiled alarm. The Mechanoid Concordat officially registered concerns about excessive human influence in security matters, while the Quantum Alliance formally welcomed the pragmatic perspective our Earth colleagues provide. Eleanor's remaining days at the conference passed in a blur of meetings, consultations, and diplomatic formalities. She found herself approached by delegations from the furthest reaches of the galaxy species she had previously only read about in xenobiological briefings. All sought the same thing: the human perspective on conflicts ranging from resource disputes to cultural misunderstandings. On her final evening aboard Athena 7, Eleanor stood at the observation deck, gazing out at the stellar panorama. The station orbited a neutron star chosen for its minimal gravitational influence on the various species represented. The view was spectacular, the dense star core pulsing with energy, surrounded by the shimmering force field that protected the station from radiation. "Contemplating your impact on galactic affairs, Ambassador?" Eleanor turned to find Ambassador Zictal beside her, his skin glowing softly in the dim lighting of the observation deck. "Wondering if I've done the right thing," she admitted. "Humans have only been part of interstellar society for a few decades. Now we're being positioned as strategic advisors to civilizations thousands of years more advanced than our own." "Advanced technologically, perhaps," Zectal observed. "But perspective is not measured in years or technological achievements. Your species brings something unique to our discussions, a willingness to acknowledge vulnerability as a path to security." "I just hope we're not being valued solely for our capacity to identify weaknesses," Eleanor said. "That's a dangerous reputation to cultivate." Zicatel's skin shifted to a thoughtful shade of blue. "I suspect what the galaxy truly values is not your ability to spot weaknesses, but your capacity to transform those weaknesses into foundations for cooperation. That is rare." "And what happens when the novelty wears off?" Eleanor asked. "When the galaxy becomes accustomed to human advisors pointing out security flaws and strategic vulnerabilities?" "By then, perhaps we will have internalized your approach," Zictal suggested. "Or perhaps your species will have found a new way to surprise us." His skin rippled with amusement. "I suspect the latter is more likely." The journey back to Earth gave Eleanor time to prepare her report for the United Earth government. How could she possibly explain that humanity, still finding its footing among the stars, had suddenly become the galaxy's go-to advisors on matters of interstellar security? That species with civilizations spanning millennia were now eagerly seeking human perspectives on their oldest conflicts. When her shuttle finally docked at the orbital diplomatic complex above Earth, Eleanor was met by a delegation of high-ranking officials, including the Secretary General herself. Ambassador Wright, the Secretary General, greeted her warmly. "Your reports have caused quite a stir. The Grand Alliance has formally requested 7 additional human representatives to serve as peace strategists. The diplomatic corps is buzzing with speculation about who will be selected." "It's an unprecedented opportunity," Eleanor acknowledged, "and a significant responsibility. Some in the Security Council have concerns," the Secretary General admitted as they walked toward the complex's main conference room. "They worry that positioning humans as strategic advisors might reinforce perceptions of our species as inherently warlike." "I shared that concern initially," Eleanor replied. "But I've come to see it differently. The other species don't value us for our capacity for conflict. They value us for our understanding of what conflict truly costs. For our perspective, that true security comes not from concealing vulnerabilities, but from acknowledging them openly." The Secretary General nodded thoughtfully. "The official record from the conference describes your contribution as facilitating a multicultural approach to territorial dispute resolution. It makes no mention of the security implications of your work." "Diplomatic understatement," Eleanor said with a small smile. "But the reality is clear to everyone involved. Half the galaxy now wants humans not as observers of peace, but as strategic advisors on how to maintain it." "And the other half," the Secretary General asked. "Is terrified of exactly the same thing," Eleanor replied honestly. "But they're requesting our advisors anyway, because in the end, they fear conflict more than they fear human perspectives." The selection process for the additional peace strategists proceeded with unprecedented scrutiny. Eleanor found herself serving on the evaluation committee, reviewing candidates' backgrounds for the particular blend of diplomatic tact and strategic insight the role required. The first cohort of human peace strategists departed for their assignments 3 months later. Historians, diplomats, and conflict resolution specialists now tasked with applying human perspectives to alien disputes. Reports filtered back gradually. A boundary dispute in the SETI sector unresolved for over 1,000 years settled within weeks of human consultation. A resource-sharing agreement in the Perseus Arm restructured to incorporate mutual monitoring systems modeled on Earth's early nuclear disarmament protocols. A cultural conflict between the Draconis Collective and the Lyran Confederation reframed as an opportunity for shared cultural preservation. 6 standard months after the 42nd Interplanetary Peace Conference, Eleanor returned to Athena 7 Station for a follow-up summit. The atmosphere was markedly different. Delegations greeted her with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and in some cases, wary apprehension. "The human returns," Ambassador Zake declared when they encountered each other in the station's central promenade. His crest extended fully in greeting. "You've sparked quite the revolution in interstellar diplomacy, Ambassador Wright. Did you know the Arcturian Enclave has established an entire academic institute dedicated to studying human strategic perspectives?" "I've heard," Eleanor replied with a smile, "though I understand they're struggling to find qualified instructors." "Naturally, non-humans teaching human perspectives would be like a human teaching Zecrian crystal metabolism." Zeke's scales flushed with amusement. "But your colleagues are making remarkable impressions throughout the galaxy. The human assigned to the SETI dispute, Ambassador Okafor, I believe has become something of a celebrity in that sector." The new summit proceeded with the efficiency that would have been unthinkable at previous conferences. Territorial disputes were addressed with a pragmatism that acknowledged security concerns openly. Resource-sharing agreements incorporated mutual monitoring provisions as standard practice. Even cultural disagreements were approached with a new framework that emphasized vulnerability and transparency. On the summit's final day, Eleanor found herself once again on the observation deck, contemplating the neutron star's pulsing core. Ambassador Zektal joined her, just as he had months before. "Your predictions have proven accurate." He observed his skin glowing with a satisfied aquamarine hue. "The galaxy has indeed embraced the human approach to conflict resolution." Not universally, Eleanor noted. I've heard the Mechanoid Concordat is still registering formal protests about excessive human influence, while simultaneously requesting 3 additional human advisors for their internal security review. Zaktal countered, skin rippling with amusement. Actions speak louder than diplomatic posturing. Eleanor smiled, recognizing the human idiom. You've been studying our expressions. Many species are, Zaktal admitted. Human communication patterns have become something of a fascination. Your tendency to use warfare metaphors, even when discussing peace, is particularly intriguing. Old habits, Eleanor said with a shrug. We're working on it. Don't, Zaktal advised, his triocular gaze fixed on the pulsing neutron star beyond the viewport. That perspective is precisely what the galaxy needs, the understanding that peace is not the absence of conflict, but its careful, conscious management. Eleanor considered this. And what happens next when the novelty of human advisors wears off? I suspect, Zaktal replied, his skin shifting to a thoughtful blue, that by then your species will have found entirely new ways to disrupt our comfortable assumptions. It seems to be your particular talent. As Eleanor prepared to return to Earth, she reviewed the official record of the 42nd Interplanetary Peace Conference. The formal documents describe the introduction of human strategic advisors as an innovative approach to multi-species collaborative governance. The security implications, the frank discussions of vulnerabilities, the strategic deterrence mechanisms, the mutual monitoring systems, were acknowledged only in technical appendices and implementation protocols. It was, Eleanor reflected, a perfect example of diplomatic understatement. The galaxy had invited humans to observe peace talks, and discovered, perhaps to its collective surprise, that the species best equipped to maintain peace were those who most intimately understood conflict. That true security came not from concealing weaknesses, but from acknowledging them openly and addressing them collectively. As her shuttle disengaged from Athena 7 station, beginning the long journey back to Earth, Eleanor watched the diplomatic complex recede against the backdrop of stars. Somewhere in that vast expanse, 7 humans were applying their unique perspectives to conflicts older than human civilization. And somewhere in the United Earth Government's diplomatic corps, 7 more candidates were being evaluated for the next cohort of peace strategists. The galaxy had invited a human to observe peace talks. Now half the galaxy wanted one as a war advisor, and the other half feared exactly that development while requesting human consultation anyway. Eleanor smiled at the irony. Perhaps this was humanity's true contribution to galactic civilization, the understanding that acknowledging vulnerability required greater courage than projecting strength, and that true peace came not from denying conflicts, but from confronting them directly. The adventure, she suspected, was just beginning.